I put my hand on top of my dad's head. I closed my eyes. I started oming, and I could feel the heat, this vortex of energy opening on the top of his head. I asked for a sign from spirit, and I said, I just want to know that he's okay. I woke up from a dead sleep, and it was 444. I realized in that moment when I got that sign, these triple numbers were also represented in frequencies. The heart codes was really created to help people remove those armors that we create. That same armor that protects us stops our light from being shared. You have to become that frequency. You have to be the love that you're putting out into the world.
The episode you're about to watch has been republished. My podcast channel reaches a lot more people now, and there's certain episodes that have slipped under the radar, and I wanted to bring them up for your attention because I truly feel they are worth listening to. So please be sure to let me know what you think of this episode in the comments below. And of course, let's continue to connect. Let me know where you are in the world and where you're listening and tuning in from. I love reading it. It's amazing, isn't it, that we can do this? And the other thing I want to say as well is find out where we are if you want to put your spiritual boots on and come and join us at one of our 5-day retreats or one-day events around the world. Links are below as well if you want to find out more what we're up to. Much love from me. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, mate. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Great to be here again. It's been a while.
It has been nearly 5 years, mate. So I purposely didn't go back and listen to our last podcast either. I really wanted to keep it fresh and see where the direction of the podcast goes today. So I'm fascinated. But I am always curious as well. How would you best describe yourself these days? If a stranger stopped you on the street, asked you what you did for a living, what would you say?
You know, I came up with the term Musetarian a couple of years ago just because there wasn't really anything that actively described what I was doing accurately. I'm part like sound healer, I'm part music producer, I'm part composer, and I'm part teacher and author as well. So my whole mission is geared towards bringing awareness of how music can be used as a tool to magnify our mission. So I came up with that term Musetarian as someone who dedicates their lives to increasing the awareness of others through the use of music.
Yeah, beautiful. What have you found over the years? I mean, your career spans so much, just looking at the different genres, the different aspects you've explored over the years to what you're doing now. The relationship with, the people out there that you present your sound and your music to, has their relationship changed and their thinking has changed around sound over what you've seen over the years?
Do you mean the collaborations or just?
I think that the awareness around sound and its power and the offering that it can have on people. Because for me, I always used to just look at music as music. It would be something I listened to. I never really had a relationship that I could actually affect. Like I didn't think about its effects and healing effects as well. And so it was always just music, And then as I started to lean into the inner work more, I've started to appreciate sound itself and music and the different qualities that it has to affect me on a deep basis, which can support my healing journey, if you like.
Yeah. So, I think even since our last interview, we're coming into a tipping point where so many more people are understanding the power of music as medicine. And, on my end, when I started doing this, guy, like over 30 years ago now. And I grew up in New York City. I grew up in a neighborhood called the Bronx. And, it's a fairly tough neighborhood. And the guys I grew up with, were great guys. But when I told them that I was moving into doing sound healing, or when they found out I was calling myself a sound healer, I will say that they definitely did not resonate with that. That wouldn't be the word that they were using, but really they asked me if I was like one of those snake oil salesmen, like the guys that you saw on Sunday nights and, creating these spontaneous healings. And that's what they associated with healing. And even the term healing, as we've defined it over the last 30 years, has shifted. And I remember having a conversation with one of them saying, well, have you ever listened to a piece of music and, it allowed you to release grief, for you're holding for someone who passed in your family, or a song that reminds you of, that first dance at the prom where you really felt, loved, or another, song that maybe makes you feel happy when you listen to it. And of course they said, yeah, well, that's different. And I'm like, well, for me, I define healing as any time that you can release a block in the physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual part of your consciousness. And those four parts equal your health. And of course, they shook their heads a little bit. And those same guys, 20 years later, the guys were calling me up and saying, hey, B, call me B instead of Barry, I know I laughed at you 20 years ago, but I've been using your music during chemo treatments, just to relax me. Or, dude, I can't sleep, at night. I said, what the hell? I'll even try Barry's music, right? Just kidding around. And so these are the same guys who, were making fun of things and now have had profound experiences. So I think that's very indicative of where we are now in our consciousness. There's so much more research than there was, even when you and I did this interview. If you go online, you're reading about new studies about sound and the chakras, showing proof that there's, energy emissions in our different energy sensors, and, neuroplexy that connect to different parts of our body, and the power of chanting Om to create limbic deactivation in the brain. These are legitimate studies you're seeing now in PubMed, where 5 years ago you were seeing some of that, but a lot more now. Why is that? Because people are interested in it. You used to only see research that was done by pharmaceutical companies because they were the only ones who could afford to do studies. So now it's becoming much more mainstream, and it's becoming part of people's life as opposed to random experiences. And this is what I always say. It's one of the biggest taglines to my work. Music's not something that just happens to you. Music is something that's happening in you. And people are forming a deeper awareness that it's not just something that you hear or listen to with your ears, but it's something you can feel with your physical body. And so, it's an exciting time to be doing this.
Totally. And mate, I gotta say, your album, The Heart Codes, there's something about that album, mate, that just, I don't even have words for it. I get emotional thinking about it, mate. Like, that is one of my default go-tos when I'm listening, or if I am awake, or I am churning, or something's going over, or I meditate in my sauna quite a lot as well. I'll get up early.
Mm-hmm.
The world gets up, and that track, mate, is phenomenal. And I often wonder, like, what is it about this track? What's he done here? Because it captivates me it gets all my sensory experiences and allows me to fully let go. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're composing something like that, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's interesting that you're talking about that album per se. I won't say CD anymore because most people don't even know what those are, right? So I'll just say album. But yeah, I mean, the Heart Codes, really, my intention for the Heart Codes was to give people an album to listen to that was inspired by using triple number frequencies. So I had a vast connection. I don't tell a lot of people about this particular story, but you said you wanted to move more into a spiritual conversation. So for me, I remember reading a lot about triple numbers from Doreen Virtue, who back then was known as one of the biggest angel experts in our country. Anyway, she later shifted her work. But I remember a whole book that she put about these triple numbers: 111, 222, 333. And it's like a phenomenon. People are seeing these triple numbers. And I remember seeing them a lot as well, but I kind of felt there was something more to it than just these explanations that she was providing from more of a textual, description of what they were. And my father, when my father passed, I was actually bedside with my father, and actually about, I would say, of maybe 6 hours before he passed, I was guided to put my hand on the top of his head and chant. And my father was another one of these guys who definitely was not into any of these things. And at the time I did that, he was very incoherent. He was in a state of fear. He was, his eyes were moving around in his head. And I just got this guidance, chant, and, just chant to your dad. So I fought with spirit a little bit, and then I finally succumbed, and I put my hand on top of my dad's head. I closed my eyes. I started oming, and I could feel the heat, this vortex of energy kind of opening on the top of his head. And when I opened my eyes, he was staring straight at me, and I was able to have this last conversation with him. He wasn't able to talk, but he was able to shake his head and, to squeeze my hand when I told him to. And we had this really great finale of a conversation between us. I didn't know that he was going to pass that evening, and I found out the next day. And I remember when I found out, thinking to myself, wow, so what I was doing when I was guided to do that was helping him to move a little bit more gracefully, because his energy centers were shut down, and opening up the crown chakra, which is the bridge between the physical and the ethereal body. And I asked for a sign from spirit the next day. And I said, I just want to know that he's okay. And that evening I woke up, or the morning, I woke up from a dead sleep, and it was 444. And I realized in that moment when I got that sign that it wasn't from me, those textual descriptions, that these triple numbers were also represented in frequencies of music. And of course, most of us, tune our keyboards to A440. But a lot of you people who are listening who do sound healing and are aware, we can, of course, tune our keyboards in different ways. And so when we tune our keyboards a little bit more, a little higher up, and we tune to A444, you get this really cool tuning that's going on. And many of you have heard, of course, I'm sure, of the frequency of 528. It's a frequency we hear a lot about. I won't say whether I believe everything I hear about it or not, but I will tell you that when you tune your keyboard to A444, that 528 shows up a third above that, exactly on the C note. And so, and all these other triple numbers show up in this tuning, because when you double, right, your in octaves, it basically doubles the frequency. So when you go an octave up from 444, it's 888. When you split it in half, it's 222. When you split that in half, it's 111. And the third above that 222, which shows up in the E, is almost exactly 333. So when I started working with that and seeing how those numbers coincide when you tune to 444, it's not just about that 528. It brings in all these other triple number frequencies. I said, so what would happen if I tuned my keyboards to that and did 9 different attunements that were based on going from 111 all the way up to 999. And I had custom made tuning forks made up to all of those frequencies. And so when I was doing the heart codes, I tuned to those specific that specific attunement, but I also use the tuning forks to create activations in each one of those 9 steps, and then wove them together into 2 different 30-minute pieces. One was geared towards attuning, and one was geared towards anointing. And so all of them are composed at 60 beats per minute. But the intention was really to assist people in moving to a space where they could uncover or unveil or move through the armors that we create to protect ourselves around the heart and live more fully, live more heart-centered. And, this was, you really weren't hearing a lot of people talking about heart coherence back then. There was definitely, that conversation was starting, but it wasn't really revolving around music, and it wasn't really revolving around the role of music in creating heart coherence, which we know now. Heart coherence is when your heart is moving to those smooth, orderly rhythms, how that affects the rest of our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. So when we can entrain to that 60 beats per minute and our hearts moving to those relaxed states, it is more effective in moving to a healing state where we have that heart awareness. So that, in conjunction with the triple number frequencies, the tuning forks, and the intention was so strong.
You literally took the words out of my mouth, mate. I was going to say, wow, there must be a powerful intention when you compose.
And there was, and I was really, I was unveiling, I was involved in a relationship with my wife, but we were deeply in love during the composition of Heart Codes, and also moving into that state of new awareness came in during the creation of that CD. But the interesting part is, you'll find this funny. My wife's a type A. She's a doctor. She's a global educator. Her name is Dr. Denise Warden. And you'll see her a lot on my channels. We're doing retreats and a lot of different things together. But she came into my studio when I was composing this, and she was trying to get work done. And she literally knocked on my door and said, "Can you lower the music? I keep literally going into another state, even just hearing it, you in the compositional process." So I thought that was very humorous, because, my mom used to knock on that door when I was playing electric guitar. Now I was getting a knock on the door for playing this beautiful, peaceful music. But when I said, "No problem, I'll play in headphones," she came in 20 minutes later and she said, "It doesn't matter if I hear it or if I don't hear it, because it's creating an energy in the house that's so peaceful and so, serene, that I'm still going to the same place." And that's what really, really made me understand the effect of music and heart coherence. Because when you're moving into that field as a composer, you're moving into those smooth, orderly rhythms that the music, is becoming a carrier of that information. And that's what music is. It's a carrier of information, of frequency, right? In this case, those specific frequencies of intention, of emotion, of harmonics. And it's all in that music that creates a field that then is getting put forth by even me tapping into the essence of seeing and feeling what that would be like for people to receive it in completion while I was in the compositional process. So I knew that I was...
Can you repeat that last little bit? Because that is so powerful. And I think we missed that.
Yeah. So as a composer, it's not, you're in the present moment. And of course, in those instances, I'm inviting God in to co-create with me, the divine, whatever you'd like to call it. It's a collaborative experience where I'm physically asking that source to come in with me. And in that process of bringing that in, I'm also envisioning the feeling of that the receiver will be receiving after the song is in its completion. Even in its initial stages when I'm just playing around with notes, I'm still tapping into that energy of the state that I'm feeling by co-collaborating and collaborating with the divine. I'm sending that out and allowing it to ripple out beyond me into the future people who will be listening to it. And I think that's why it's so powerful. And that's why you receiving it in that way, because that's embedded in the music. The music is a carrier of where the composer is in that specific time that he's behind the keyboard or the guitar or in a recording studio. And that's why I think it's so important as well. And you know this because you're doing these beautiful events and retreats with people that, your energy has to be in alignment with your emotion and your intention when you're going in front of people or whether you're creating by yourself in the studio. I could have an intention of being in a space of love, but if I just walked in from an argument or a situation where I feel like my energy is stuck, then it's not going to be in alignment. The intention and the emotion have to be aligned. So it's not enough to have an intention. It has to be aligned with the emotion because the emotion is the carrier of that intention. So for all you composers listening out there, when you go behind your keyboard or your guitar or whatever it is you're using, that make it sacred. Move into a sacred place where you're feeling the energy of what you want to become. So whatever frequency you're looking to share in the world, you have to become that frequency. You have to be the love that you're putting out into the world. And you have to be that inner peace. You have to could be the vibrancy, and you could be doing, a drumming track, whatever it is, you have to become the energy that you're seeking.
Yeah, that is so powerful. It's funny. I woke up this morning, Barry, and the first thing that popped in my head was mention the heart codes, like straight away.
Wow, very interesting.
Yeah. So for you to share all that then was just beautiful, mate. Thank you. It's fascinating about intention, because what you said there will translate to any aspect of our lives that we're working. If we were willing to allow ourselves to be present in that labor of love. I feel we're so conditioned on this linear time frame to goal set, tick tasks, orientate, to just get through it, just get the job done. Let's get on to the next thing, whatever it is. And we're missing where all the juice is.
Right.
And I have to ask you as well, it triggered a loop in your morning. What do you mean? Because the tracks are called attuning and anointing. What do you mean by anointing?
Yeah, I mean, anointing is just a very sacred term. Like when you use an oil to anoint someone, right? It's geared towards being a rite of passage. So a rite of passage is when you're literally setting that intention. We have specific times in our lives, like you were saying, you had a spiritual awakening. That's a rite of passage. And as we move into different rites of passage, we can anoint ourselves with different things. Some people do it with different oils. Some people, do it with color. Some people do it with sound. What is going to create, a marker in your life that allows you to upgrade vibrationally, and that's really what rites of passage are about. When we move into different stages of our lives, we're shifting our vibration somehow. When you go through a breakup or a relationship, and that's an event that's, maybe you were married for 20 years. That's a rite of passage. Or getting married is a rite of passage. When someone's physical body transitions, that's a rite of passage. In the Jewish faith, a boy being bar mitzvahed at the age of 13 becomes a man in the eyes of the temple at the age of 13. That's a rite of passage. I had a rite of passage when I was about 15. my dad bought me my first electric guitar, which is behind me. And he made me promise in that moment that I was going to stick with music. And literally, we bought a guitar we couldn't afford. And at that time, of course, I made that promise because I was 14 and excited about getting the guitar. But I didn't realize that it was a rite of passage, because when I made that promise, it was so anchored in that literally that promise followed me throughout my whole life. Many times I was going to sell that guitar and I'd look at it. I'd see the name Les Paul written on the top of it. And that was my father's belief in me when he bought me that guitar. And it was so profound seeing that every day, that rite of passage. I was anointed with that guitar. Right. And 30 years later, I ended up working with Les Paul, the guy who invented the electric guitar, co-producing a Grammy Award-winning track with, him. And, it was all based upon that rite of passage. That anointment, I believe, rippled out because it was so profound to create, again, becoming the vibration of what you're seeking. I became the vibration of Les Paul. The guitar.
That's wild.
Became more than a name. And that person came into the field to co-create with me 30 years later. So
that's pretty. Were you consciously there then doing that to manifest that into your life?
No.
Were you aware of this work at the time? Or?
No, not at all. I mean, I was 14 years old, but
by the time you even got to Les Paul, and
by the time I got to Les Paul, yeah, I had started to do this work, and I had started to create, the type of music that I'm creating now. And there was a kind of bridge. There was a crossover where they both intertwined, in my path. So yes, there was that awareness. But yeah, I didn't, not till many years later, look back and really think of how that was a rite of passage, how that was an anointing, of so many years back.
Yeah. And it's fascinating, because like through our lives, there are so many when we reflect upon them, but so often we're not given the tools to be able to navigate these moments. And I know that's when we can get into trouble. Sometimes we're resisting that evolution, that flow of life and those transitions. And it can manifest out in other ways then, isn't it? Especially with the stress and the pace of the world that we're seeing.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of these rites of passage and these, these anointings, so to speak, a lot of times they're married with music and sound. And, and we can also navigate these rites of passage more gracefully and effectively with the use of music and sound and vibration, and it's just awareness, and that's one of the things I'd like to continue in this conversation. Is like, how can we bring these principles into daily life where they become practical ways to move us through and navigate our energy more effectively, so that we have more of our energy for our life's mission and our life's purpose. Because if we're not moving energy on a daily basis, it gets stuck. And I remember when my mom passed, Guy, that I was literally anchoring in a lot of the things that needed to be done in the family during the passing, and being the man of the family within that. And I had very little time to grieve. And literally 6 months later, I said, I need to create a rite of passage that allows me to grieve and bereave my mom and celebrate her life more effectively. And it was just that awareness that came in. And I created a playlist of my mom's favorite songs and songs that I remembered her by. Some of them were humorous. One of them was Tom Jones. She loved Tom Jones. What's New, Pussycat. Another was an Andre Reyes, a piece. And I just combined it and allowed myself to feel my mom's energy and used it as a rite of passage so I can move the energy, because I didn't have the ability to do it at the time of her passing. And if you think about that, I mean, that's it's beautiful to do for someone's passing, but why do we have to wait and use it for grieving? Why can't we use it for other things in our daily lives? I mean, we schedule in everything in our lives. I'm sure you looked at your schedule for tomorrow, right? And you probably know exactly what your day looks like, already, or you have an idea of that. But do we schedule in sound or music or something that would help us in our day? If we know that we're going to visit a hospital, a relative in a hospital, do we play a piece of music or schedule a piece of music in to help us, be in a calmer state before we go in there? Or a leadership meeting where it might be a more epic piece that gets us up. And so just as we nourish ourselves with food every day, are we doing everything we can to nourish ourselves sonically? And I think really that's the next steps. It's great to do, great to do interviews, great to do live events, great to do retreats. But if we're not taking it into our lives on a daily basis and using it to upgrade our vibration every day, like imagine if you scheduled in 3 pieces of music in your day, morning, afternoon, and evening. If you did that every day, that consciousness of doing that so that you have more time to magnify your mission with music, how that could create and upgrade your energy and what you share in the world. Just that little principle, that awareness could change your life. And then from there, it's just really fine tuning. So I think we take music for granted because it's so readily available. But we can use that really to create enormous transformation in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just pondering still on your story as well, that the fact that, you have the awareness to understand what is going on with even the grief, and be able to set up an environment where you allow yourselves to grieve fully through that. I just, even when my dad passed, I'll tell you a short story here, but when he was in hospital, I flew home to see him and be with him, and they kept delaying the operation, and my time frame ran out, and I flew back. And the moment I landed, they said, "Oh, we're putting him into the operation," and the operation killed him. It was he didn't come out the other end, and so I found myself flying back again a week later, and so there was all these logistics and everything, and you don't really. It's such a fast-paced movement. I didn't allow myself to fully grieve that process, but I didn't understand it at the time either. This was going back 11 years now. And I was kind of on my own journey. But then 2 years later, I signed up, or even a year later, anyway, frame doesn't matter. Matt, who I now work with, was running a 6-week sound healing workshop where every Saturday we go over there for 3 hours. And who's now my wife, I was dating her at the time, and this was like 2 years after my dad passed. So I kind of thought I'd put it to bed and got over it. And each Saturday we would go into a sound journey. And by about week 3 or 4, I was starting to walk around feeling really anxious, like something was going to explode. And I'm like, what is this? What's going on? And even when I remember sitting on the couch, just like feeling so uncomfortable, not knowing what to do with it. And I'd speak to Matt, and he'd just say, "It's okay. Just be with it and see what presents itself." And then I'll never forget, in the 5th week of doing these sound journeys, my heart just exploded, and all this, and I felt the presence of my dad instantly. And it just all made sense. Like everything I'd been holding, I allowed that energy to finally move, and I could feel it open up and be free of it. And I just bawled my eyes out, like just in the yoga studio, it was like 25 people, and I just cried for like 20 minutes, just sobbing deeply. And it was such a huge lesson for me from experience and understanding how we do hold these emotions, how we do feel things. And if we set up ourselves the right environments, that we can allow that really to move again. And yeah, it was a pivotal moment in my journey, that's for sure, from those things. Yeah,
Wow.
incredible.
Yeah. I mean, that's sound does that because we can't prepare ourselves for it to create a defense. A lot of times, when there's we're using a modality for healing, sometimes the subconscious comes in and tries to create a protection around it beforehand. But sound and music are so spontaneous that when you walk into that space of a circle, most likely the person who was facilitating didn't even know exactly what they would be playing, because a lot of times we're doing things based on the energy of the group, and that decides what we're playing or what we're doing in that moment. So it kind of tears down the walls of the subconscious being able to protect in any way. And we, at some point, whether it's week 1 or week 5, right, the soul surrenders. And before that, we're identifying. I always look at sound and working with sound on 3 steps. I call it IRA: identify, release, and attune. So when we're working with sound, we're identifying where we might be holding these blocks. As it came up for you, you were feeling anxious, and I'm sure you might have even uncovered where you felt you were holding that anxiousness in your physical body. And we can feel that, with sound and when someone's facilitating that. And then we work with releasing it, because when you're bringing in new energy, it's like you're going through a closet, where you're getting rid of your older clothes that you don't need or that don't fit you anymore. You're releasing things that no longer serve you, so that you can move into bringing new energy in. You have to empty out first. So you have to identify, release, and then there's an awareness during that release that when you broke down and, you were able to grieve, that literally empties your vessel and then allows you to really bring that awareness in and saying, okay, wow, what's next? Now that all of this awareness or all this heavier energy is gone in my physical body, what do I want to bring in? And that's where the attunement comes in. You get to look at the awareness of what you intend to bring in and to raise your consciousness based on the experience and based on releasing whatever you did. And for me, those are really 3 important aspects of healing. Because if we're just going into an attunement and we don't understand that we have to identify and we have to move energy in order to go to different levels and these rites of passage that we're talking about, then we don't hold the attunement. It's like tuning a piano and not knowing why it's going out of tune and expecting something different to occur. Maybe it was the moisture, or maybe it's too dry in a room, or maybe your 3-year-old's banging on it, right? When you're not home. If you don't know what's going on in the environment, you can't change, what is taking that instrument out of tune. And it's the same thing with us. We're instruments. We're constantly tuning and aligning when we do this work, but we're also moving out of tune based on things that happen in our environment. A person, place, thing, situation, event, or energy that takes us out of that Zen state on a daily basis. So if we don't know what's taking us out in our environment, we're just going to keep going out of tune. So that awareness of identifying it and releasing it first is really important, because you can spend your energy more effectively when you know what it is, or else you just continue to have these knee-jerk reactions. Whenever that issue or energy comes in, you react or overreact the same way, and you spend much more energy than you need to.
Right. We're like leaky buckets, and we're just giving our energy away then. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. We literally just finished a retreat last weekend, and a lady came up to me at lunchtime, just before we left at the last day. We spent 4 days together, Barry. And she said, she'd been feeling her heart wanting to open all weekend. And she
Mm.
finally surrendered and her heart opened. And she said it was palpable. I like really felt it. But then she said, she couldn't get this, I could still see her glaze in it, like this awe and wonder. And she said, I've been having injections for shoulder pain for the last 18 months. And she said, I've got no pain. She said, it's moved, it's gone, you know?
Mm.
And it fascinates me the relationship to the physiology and, like you say, the emotions, the mental and the spiritual aspects. That it is, we are a complete. It is a holistic approach to everything, and if we give our body the environment, I feel the wisdom in that is far greater than we'll ever comprehend. You know.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And it goes back, I'm circling back to the heart codes, because the heart codes was really created to help people remove those armors that we create. And most of us, when you think of it, our heart is our center, and our center energy center, right? And our 7 basic energy centers.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, in early stages of our lives, a lot of times before 5 years old, we create these armors based on situations that happen in our lives that we don't have tools at the time to know how to handle that. So we subconsciously create these armors to protect ourselves, and these armors are created around our heart. Our heart holds our soul's purpose of what we're here to do. So if a child is, told you're better to be seen than to be heard, they might stop talking as much, or might stop sharing or communicating. That's an armor. And sometimes we don't even realize that we have these armors on until we realize that we want to be more present in our heart. We want to lead more heart-centered lives. And that longing that lady felt to be more open, to share more of her heart, the armor, it does really well to protect us, but it also serves a negative aspect, or a lower vibrational aspect, where it also stops us from emitting our light as fully as we can from our heart, because that same armor that protects us stops our light from being shared fully. So when we can move past those armors and release them, and that's where music and sound and vibration come in, are so powerful, because nothing does it. And I'll say this not just because I'm a musician, but yes, I am a little bit biased, but sound, I think, does it more effectively than anything else when we're working with the heart, and we're working with removing those armors and wanting to be more present in our heart, more heart-centered than music, sound, and vibration.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm not a musician, I hear you. I wanted to speak to, there's a couple of things while we go through the podcast, Barry. You mentioned the word to me via email, and I went, oh, what does that mean? My Welsh vocabulary must be limited, because there's these words that are popping up, but panacea. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, panacea is a cure-all. When we look at something as well, this is it. This is what is going to be the magic cure for things. Whether it could be anything, it could be a specific pharmaceutical. It could be, a specific frequency. And why I mentioned that in the email is because I think we're learning more and more that individualized medicine is really where transformational healing occurs, where it's not a one size fits all approach to any type of illness. And I think it's the same with sound and music, that in terms of next steps in the sound healing community and just the overall consciousness in sound healing, is that we need to work on an individual basis and not expect that it's going to be a one size fits all for everything. I think it's very easy to get caught up in this frequency is going to cure this, or this frequency is the one you should listen to because it's better than this one, or this frequency is what my friend told me to use for working with this in my life. And the thing is, I'm not saying that specific frequencies don't have beneficial effects. Of course they do. And they could be life-changing and very transformational. But what I'm saying is for each individual, every day our vibration is changing. So does it make sense that you would use the same tool that you used the day before if something has changed in your life? Or would you go inward and see what resonates with you? And that's really what I'm saying, is using music as a bridge. So anytime somebody recommends a specific piece of music, a specific frequency that's going to do this or that, don't say no, don't say yes. Say, where am I now? Where do I want to go? And is this the piece of music? Is this the frequency? Or is this the composition that's going to take me there? And listen to it. See how it makes you feel. Does it make you feel expansive when you hear the piece of music? Like you're underneath like a night sky or on top of a mountain? Or does it make you feel contracted? Because one person's remedy might not be yours per se. Just like as a doctor, you might say, well, broccoli is really good for fighting cancer, or it's really good for, working with this type of illness or that. If the person is allergic to broccoli, it's going to create inflammation in their system, and it's not going to be good for them. So again, it's all individual. And I believe that we should be doing this on a daily basis. As I said, you change every day. Listen to new music, experiment. I utilize frequencies in my music based on what inspires me and not what's out there, what people are talking about or what they say it's going to do. But I put it in my music because it expands my consciousness. It makes me feel good vibrationally. And whoever needs that specific vibration or frequency, or whoever it might help, are going to resonate with that because it's happening in you, not just outside of you. So when you hear the heart codes, it's resonating with something in your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual body that says, this feels like it's going to be good for me. It's the same with any piece of music. So I just would and really encourage people to go into listening to music and sound and vibration and frequency with the curiosity of a child, learning music, or the curiosity of a child listening to, a genre they've never heard before. And that's all really. Just check in with yourself, see what feels good and what doesn't. And you're an individual. You're a sound healer on your own, whether you play an instrument or not. You have the ability to use your voice, whether it's pretty or not. You can use your breath. We have these instruments that God's given us as healers ourselves to use, ways to use sound that don't require you to play an external instrument, that you are the instrument. And I think that's really the next steps in really fine-tuning awareness. It doesn't have to happen outside of ourselves. It can happen, it comes from us, and we know best what is going to create healing and transformation. We just have to learn to listen on a much more minute level, to listen to our own heartbeat, to listen to our breath, to listen to the sounds of nature every day on a much more magnified awareness. And we'll find that all the answers are there. We don't need prescriptions per se for someone to prescribe to us. We are the healers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the challenge is, isn't it, that we are so brain dominated in society. Like, we have people coming into our events, even the 1 day events, and I've got no concept of the heart. Like, that there's no bridge being built yet, and it can feel impossible for them. They're like, I don't, none of it makes sense. I'm thinking about it, and if we don't give ourselves, like you say, the space and the time to be more present and start to be with that and nurture those connections, it can feel challenging, because we always go back to the default old. That's for sure.
Yeah, and how deep do you want to go? In terms of what do you view as healing? It's not just something that is going to happen and be satisfied in the mind by knowing, acquiring the wisdom and the facts behind, why something works. It's great to have, and sometimes it gives us more. The science gives us permission sometimes to take the journey. When we know, this binaural beat is going to assist me in entraining my brain to an alpha brainwave frequency. We know how that works. Different frequency in each ear, and our brain is going to be able to entrain to the difference to the two of the targeted brainwave state. But if you don't like the piece of music that you're listening to, right, then the science behind that is not really going to work, because it's not going to create the relaxation response that your body needs to adapt to it. So the science could be there, but again, how deep do you want to go? You can have all the facts behind it, but if you're not willing to go in to find out why something happened in the physical body, or why there's an emotional situation going on, you're not willing to peel back the layers of the resonance of the issue and where it was created, then you're most likely going to keep attracting similar situations into your life until it's released, because that vibration, that frequency still exists within you. So the deeper you go and the more you're releasing, then the more you have the ability to have experiences. And so it's like, what comes first, the chicken or the eggs? Do I learn the science first so that I can have the experience? Or do I have the experience and then try to understand the science? And, it's different for every person. Again, it's individual. It's not the same for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. I was definitely the experience first, and then starting to figure out what the hell happened from that point.
Right. I'm similar.
Yeah. A couple of questions before we wrap it up. One is what do you do in your daily routines that you could share with people that helps you stay heart-centered and creative? And I mean, you live and created a life for yourself that's, pretty beautiful, mate. And what practices or rituals do you find that you find helpful for yourself?
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest ones is staying in the state of creation. So for me, that's like the medicine itself, is moving into the compositional process and playing with sound. Again, like I'm a child. Like when my dad got me that guitar and I learned the first three chords that I learned, and was writing songs, to keep that curiosity and that hunger, and connecting in that creative state for me is a meditative process. That's really the biggest part of my meditative process, is my creative process, inviting God in to co-create with me. And I try to do it every day in some aspect or another, whether it's through music or co-creation in other things, and to move into that state where I'm meditating, walking for me, and being around the sounds of nature is really one of the most profound ways to stay in practice. I think of the when I'm by an ocean and listening to an ocean, and the wind is all around me and the birds are above my head, I remember thinking, wow, this is the true surround sound. This is, how many channels of surround sound do we have to create to emulate this? The technology was created by God, So nature sounds. I like to chant and as well, and that helps me get out of my thinking mind and my mental chatter. And yeah, and really, I call it your inner symphony. It's one of the most profound things that I can do on a daily basis is place my hands on my heart, close my eyes, feel my own heartbeat, hear my own breath going in and out. And let's just do this together. If you're watching and feels comfortable for you, just place your hands on your heart. Feel your own heartbeat. Hear your own heartbeat. No matter what's going on in your life, this is unique to you. This is your own heart code. This is your home. It's coming back to you at any time you want in your day. Just feeling that, breathing into it, releasing a sigh out, and just being in gratitude for this life force that moves through you, that we have very little control over. It's a gift in this awareness. One more big breath in, and one more breath out. And I do that as many times as I can during the day, as many times as I can remember, just to move energy. If I'm in a situation and I feel like I need to kind of cleanse myself, or I need to come back to my own unique vibration, and it's always there, our heartbeat, our breath, it's like always there. There's nothing you have to buy. I'm not saying like these tools aren't great. I love gongs, I love bowls, I love tuning forks, I love my keyboards, I love guitars, but God equipped us with all of these sounds as well. And if you can tap into that awareness of your heart and your breath, you hear music in a completely different way. It's so much more magnified. It's like closing your eyes. When you open it up, everything seems so much more vibrant because you're going internal. It's the same thing. Close our eyes and hear the sounds within us, then we receive music in a completely different way.
Absolutely. Well, maybe it's a good time to, if you're happy to play for a couple of minutes, Barry, and receive that music now in that day.
That sounds good. Yeah. So I'm just going to tap into the group energy of whoever's listening to this, whoever listens back to it in replay mode, that we're collaborating in some sense. All of our vibrations are in them in the moment. And create an intention for yourself when you listen to this music. Close your eyes. Place your hands on your heart if it feels comfortable for you. And you should hear the music in a few moments.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Ah, you just get swept away. I forgot where I was then.
Awesome. Yeah, me too.
Mate, yeah. Well, I just have to say, mate, I do a lot of podcasts, and today has been just phenomenal. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing the space. It's the reason why I podcast, is to allow space to have conversations like this. And yeah, I loved every minute of it, mate. So
Well,
it's
me
deeply
too. I
appreciated.
appreciate it. Appreciate you and all the awareness you bring through these podcasts. And um, we have to make it less than 4 years for the next.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. Where can people find out more about your work, Barry? I'll put links in the show notes, but it's great to just share
Yeah, I
out
mean,
about
the,
them as
the
well.
easiest place to find me is at barrygoldsteinmusic.com. A lot of my courses are offered there as well as well. You can find me on all of the platforms that people check out music, Spotify, iTunes, a lot of great information and free videos on YouTube. And yeah, I'm not hard to find.
No, you're
Also,
not.
I'm on Amazon as well. And my book's called The Secret Language of the Heart. If you're looking to do this, more of this work and dive a little bit deeper into the science and the spirituality behind how music, sound, and vibration can be utilized to create transformation and healing in your life, that's a great way to dive a little bit deeper as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Barry. Deeply appreciate it. And hopefully one day I get to meet you in person as opposed to the remote stuff.
That would be
You never
great.
know.
And I'm wishing you many, many blessings and new and beautiful things that are coming into your life.
Thank you so much. Do you ever make it to Australia, Barry? Have you been?
You know, I've been to Australia once in 2010. So I
Oh,
am
wow.
due for another trip. So I'm open to synchronicities.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Barry.
Thank you, Guy.